So the U.S. forces invade Iraq March 20th, 2003. In a few weeks later, the Iraqi regime crumbles. I think it was around April 9th. That's when we, of course, that famous scene of
Yep.
toppling Saddam Hussein's statue.
Mm-hmm.
11 days after that, there is the looting of the museum in Baghdad, all of these artifacts. That's Hitler's birthday. That was the April 20th was also the day you had this dream, being in this medieval castle, seeing Hitler hunched over a map pointing to someplace in Eurasia, I think you said.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Was he pointing to Baghdad?
Well, yeah, not exactly. I think what I didn't get the perfect glimpse of where exactly he was pointing, but I think really it was just the general region, because this region is very significant in the prophecy in terms of later in the prophecy, it describes the Antichrist's forces, and they are invading from east to west, headed towards Jerusalem. And it says they are camped at the shores of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers.
Right.
So let's back up just before the invasion. While gearing up for the invasion, W. Bush Jr. he called Jacques Chirac, the then president of France, and had a very strange conversation with him about this invasion. So Bush is trying to persuade him to join their coalition and help with the invasion. And Bush says to him, quote, well, he mentions, quote, their common faith, which people generally take to be Christianity, but I think he means something else, actually. But he makes reference to their common faith, and then he says, quote, Gog and Magog are at work in the Middle East. The biblical prophecies are being fulfilled. This confrontation is willed by God, who wants us to use this conflict to erase his people's enemies before a new age begins, end quote. Now, we know that quote happened because the French president was bewildered by this weirdness, and he sought the aid of a French theologian, Thomas Romer. And Thomas Romer later wrote about it in his book. And a journalist after that asked Chirac in an interview, when he's no longer president, if this conversation did indeed occur. And Chirac confirmed, yes, indeed it did. And he was very put off by it. He thought it was very fanatical and strange.
Right. Gog and Magog, Gog of Magog, or sometimes referred to as Gog and Magog. This is supposed to be the location of the final battle of good and evil, Armageddon.
Correct. And furthermore than that, Talmudic rabbis in the Voyosha, the Midrash Voyosha, along with Zephyr Zerubbabel. Zephyr Zerubbabel was the last of the Davidic Jews who founded the Second Temple, and he had a vision, interestingly, about the Third Temple and its destruction. And he also laid out his own prophecy about a Antichrist king who would be defeated by the Messiah. And furthermore, the Midrash and Zerubbabel both equated Gog, and you're correct, it's Gog of Magog. Mm-hmm. So they're not two figures. It is Gog of Magog, his land. And they both equate Gog to Nimrod.
Interesting.
Yes.
So let me ask you, when
Sure.
George W. Bush called
Mhm,
Chirac and said,
mhm.
this is, we're talking end time stuff here. We have to get involved in this. This is, I'm paraphrasing, obviously. This is the end.
Right.
Are you saying that, that Bush understood that this archaeological discovery of Nimrod's tomb meant that Nimrod, the Antichrist, had to be stopped, and that's why he wanted the invasion? Or did he come at it from the other side? In other words, we have to get control of Nimrod because this is who we worship.
That's right. And see, this gets back. So we're gonna have to would take a really quick dive down this to a separate rabbit hole quickly. If you do an internet search for the genealogy of U.S. presidents, you will find that some time ago, a middle school student and her grandfather discovered that all but one president are linked genealogically to, they are descendants of King John of Laughlin. Furthermore, if you go back beyond that, they descend from Charlemagne. And on the deepest level, and even people like the House of Rothschild in their biographies say that they descend from Nimrod. And so what we're talking about are very highly diluted remnants of Nephilim kings. And this is where the whole entire concept of the divine right to rule comes from, the Nephilim. So just a real quick recap on that. And I know this is, we are in like the intellectual Olympics here.
Well, we're this program. My listeners are familiar with the concept
Good.
of Nephilim from Genesis 6 or from Enoch, the Book of Enoch, and
Excellent.
so these are the hybrids, the human
Right.
fallen angel hybrids.
Right. And you will also know, if you do a deep dive into European history of the royals, it is absolutely saturated in witchcraft. Just probably the most famous example would be like Mary, Queen of Scots, Bloody Mary, bathing in the blood of children to preserve her youth. And then we can flash forward to modern times. We have these men gathering together at Bohemian Grove, right, where they do an offering every summer to this giant wooden owl idol. And none of this is conjecture. So so right, when he is speaking to Chirac, he knows they share a chromosome or two. And he is saying to Chirac, our common faith, meaning Satanism, and Gog, meaning Nimrod. And it appears that Chirac does not even believe in this, and he's not even aware of it. But Bush is. And although, George W. Bush, not the brightest bulb in the box, he may have been reading a script that was written for him. Yep. But regardless, he is talking directly about Nimrod and his tomb and this discovery. And yes, indeed, I submit to you, this is the WMD they were so desperate to acquire.
The tomb of Nimrod, was that taken to the museum in Baghdad? Was that looted?
They were both looted. The tomb, no, his tomb had not yet been raised. That's really my point about the timing. They had to initiate an international conflict to disrupt Fassbinder's work. Because if Fassbinder had been allowed to continue, there's no telling where those remains would have ended up. Or whatever. The point is, they wanted to get it directly. Now, the museum contained many artifacts from all over Nimrod's empire, that related to Gilgamesh. And now let's talk about the looting of that museum really quick.
Right. I remember the Baghdad battery was supposedly taken.
That's right. That's right. That's what they were after from the museum, was ancient technological, sort of, for lack of a better word, not technology in the way we think of it, but ancient technology. They were after exotic ancient technology that had belonged to Nimrod, Gilgamesh, and they looted the museum. Iraqi locals claimed to witness U.S. troops looting the museum in the dead of night. And I know for a fact that it was not Iraqi citizen looters. That may have occurred after the fact. But whoever these initial looters were, they walked right past huge racks of gold coins, what would equate to millions and millions of dollars in gold coins. And they went straight for the vault. And all they removed were thousands of objects relating to Nimrod. And then, so there was a White House committee of archaeological and antiquities experts, and they were called CPAC. CPAC stands for Cultural Possessions Advisory Committee. The three heads of that committee resigned. They resigned in protest because they understood that this was a preemptive war and that the US military was well aware of the existence of this museum and the treasures that it held. And they could not accept that the US military just, nonchalantly left it unguarded. And I suspect they know the US military looted it. Now, they didn't say that publicly, because, if they had, they'd be making a very nasty enemy of a very corrupt and criminal White House. So I think they resigned because they knew the US military was at the very least complicit with the looting of that museum.
What did the artifacts in the museum have to do with Nimrod's? I mean, these artifacts may be connected to Nimrod in some way, but how does looting the Baghdad Museum of these artifacts prevent Fassbinder from raising Nimrod's crypt or what have you?
Well, I think it was just a grab of, you see, they understand that Nimrod was not just a man. They understand that he is a Nephilim hybrid. And while we're on that really quick, according to these ancient tablets about Gilgamesh, they specifically state that he is 2/3 non-human and 1/3 human. And in the Revelation prophecy, it says this calls for somebody with wisdom. And it says the beast has a number, and that number is 666.
Mm-hmm.
And that number is the number of a man, and let those with wisdom decipher that. You see, John understood, he was familiar with the Gilgamesh tale, as everybody in the ancient world was, because it was so famous. Again, that legacy of renown. And so what is a 2/3 fraction converted to a decimal? It is 66.6%. So he is leaving us a clue. While they don't want to announce his identity, but he is leaving us with a clue that equals 666. And that relates to what you're asking, why are these artifacts and remains so important? Because Nimrod isn't just a warlord king. He's a hybrid of vast destructive knowledge and power. He had ancient technology, which enabled him to do these wondrous building projects. I found other Jewish scholars who suggested that Nimrod, by way of his father Cush, came into possession of garments that belonged to Adam. And these garments enabled him to have very powerful combat abilities. And I don't know what those are, but I speculate perhaps an invisibility, a garment that rendered him invisible, perhaps.
Right.
That's just speculation.
Okay.
So I don't know that.
The invading U.S. forces, was it their mission to take Nimrod's remains back to America?
Absolutely. Absolutely. By the way, local Iraqis also claim to have witnessed U.S. troops digging in the dirt out at the archaeological site. Now I can't confirm, I can't prove that, but I can prove that no significant archaeology has been done there since. And despite the instability of the region, it has settled down quite a lot since the conflict.
Yes.
And it's been under U.S. control. So there's no way they would not have resumed such an epic discovery. We really can't overstate the significance of that discovery. Scholars weren't sure, mainstream scholars were not sure that Gilgamesh even existed. So this is tantamount to finding the tomb of Moses or King Arthur or something like that.
Well, it's amazing. I don't think there's ever been an archaeological find that has contradicted the Bible. It's always confirmation of what the Bible says. So, in your estimation, did they take control of Gilgamesh's or Nimrod's remains? And if so, what are they planning on doing with them?
Well, so I believe they did. And that's why there has been no follow-up, because they have been preventing it. Because if there were a follow-up discovery, what they would find would be a big, huge, empty sarcophagus. And then people could quite easily connect the dots. So they have sealed off this find so people could not follow up on it. And I believe they found it. And I believe they raised Gilgamesh's tomb on Adolf Hitler's birthday as part of a symbolic, you see, because they understand what I just broke down, that this is a succession of Antichrist kings. And these people meaning the ruling elites who pull strings of people like Bush and Cheney, they understand the symbolic, ritualistic nature of what they're involved in, and so they raise it up not only as a manifestation of the prophecy, but also as a continuation of Third Reich science. Just as Operation Paperclip brought over German scientists like von Braun, and then the first soft lunar landing occurs on April 20. So that's an homage to Adolf Hitler's dream of landing on the moon.
I'm sorry, that was July 20, wasn't
it? Soft landing of the modules. Yes, you're correct. The manned first touchdown on July 20. But and actually there was a crappy module that they sent up, but the first soft landing of a thing that could like take pictures and observe the surface of the moon, that was on Adolf Hitler's birthday. I believe it was 67 or 9. Okay. So, and by the way, you mentioned earlier the German heritage of these scientists. I do not think that's coincidental. Mm-hmm. In fact, the German scientist who co-directed alongside Fassbinder His name is Eichmann.
Ah.
And I do not, that's a lot of smoke for no fire there.
As in Adolf Eichmann.
Precisely. And who was one of the head Nazi scientists. So that would be that's far too much smoke for no fire. We're beyond reasonable doubt there that these things are all interconnected.
So the elites possibly have Nimrod's remains. He is the Antichrist. He will be resurrected, will appear during the tribulation, sort of the countdown to the end times, takes a prominent role on the stage 3.5 years into the 7-year tribulation. Is there a particular ritual that they need to perform in order to resurrect? Do we know Nimrod or?
I really, there, it's hard to say what they're up to behind closed doors, but I will say, they successfully cloned a sheep in 96. And that's, that there's been a lot of time that's passed since then. And right now, as we speak, I know laboratories in Japan. Now, while these laboratories are in Japan, they are most likely funded by Western money and these elites. And these laboratories in Japan have publicly stated that they are attempting to clone extinct species. So these laboratories, their whole focus is cloning ancient DNA, and they are attempting to clone woolly rhinoceros. They are attempting to clone woolly mammoths and mastodons, and that's just what they say publicly. So we do indeed have the technology to clone an ancient human being, an ancient hybrid. And this explains, it doesn't just explain, that's what's so profound here. It explains the prophecy in terms of one who was and is yet to come. But also, how on earth did this man John know these things? That the sixth Antichrist would reign for only a short while, and then this final one is one who already existed previously and will come again. So they have his remains. They are attempting to clone him. And this is the decipherment of the Revelation prophecy. And when you objectively look at all of this, it takes you to a disturbing place that indeed we are living in end times.